Hello, everybody. Welcome to what I think is going to be a really fun panel. We just had a great conversation. We actually wish we would have recorded the conversation because everybody had some fantastic things to say, but this panel is called Is Your Label's Brand Recognizable? We'll do a quick intro. I'm Michael Kauffman. I work for the Clio Awards, which are a global advertising awards program. We have different programs in different industries, including Clio Music, that I oversee, and I also oversee our Clio Cannabis Awards program. So if you want to talk about music and cannabis, I would love to talk about music and cannabis. But I'll just go down the line, and why don't you say hello and introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are.
Hey, is this working okay? My name is Kaneko. I work over at Warp Records. I've been there for 7 years, and I look after global campaigns and also run retail for North America.
I'm Doran Jones. I'm the label manager at Mad Decent. I've been there for about 7 years in this October. Yeah.
Nice. I'm Eileen Tilson. I work at an indie label called A2IM Records, which is one of the oldest indies in the country, second oldest to be exact. I oversee all the marketing for our artists. I've been there 8 years and love it.
Hey, I'm Shamz Obasaju. I work for Ingrooves, which is an independent distributor under Universal Music Group, where I head our RHR department. That's R&B, hip hop, and reggae. And I've been there 2.5 years at this point.
All right. Well, I'd like to start by answering the question that is the name of the panel. Is your label's brand recognizable? I mean, just be good to start out by maybe hearing a little bit about how you look at your label as a brand, how you would define it, you know, what the voice of the label is, that kind of thing. So whoever wants to jump in first, or we could just go down the line. Derek, you want to lead off?
For sure. So yeah, I guess like just for a bit of context, Warp Records is roughly 30 years old. It originated in Sheffield in the UK. And, you know, since then we've moved down to London and have offices in New York and LA as well. And I think over that long period of time, there's obviously been a lot of changes in the world of music, but I do think that there is like a level of synonymous identity that's sort of like manifested throughout. Within the name itself, right? Warp is kind of alluding to like a subversion of sorts. But at the same time, the logo has remained pretty much the same for 30 years. It's like an image of like a globe with like a lightning bolt struck through it. And it says Warp. And I think it speaks to that nature of how the music is like, it's very critical, it's very art first, and a lot of the artists that we work with have very singular identities, but it is something that, you know, we want to feel inclusive, and the music on the label should be something that people around the world can really enjoy fully. So I don't know how effectively that communication gets through all the time, but that is kind of the general premise, I think, behind the iconography, the history, and where we currently are.
I love just on the site where it says Adventures in Sound, right? That sums it up for me. If we go in, Doran?
Yeah. So I think around like 2005, it's kind of like up in the air, 2005, 2006, whenever this was like officially formed with Mad Decent. But it was kind of birthed out of like online forums, the Holler board initially. So Hollertronics parties that were out in Philly by like Low Budget and Diplo. A handful of other like well-known DJs now sort of came from that era and that Holler board. But it was just a big community space for that. And so out of that came like the Mad Decent block parties, which started really small, really community driven, and then kind of grew over time into more of like a festival format. So the label kind of grew with that, had like viral moments on the internet with like the Harlem Shake. And yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot throughout the years. We've gotten to a point now where we're able to like distribute other artists and labels who aren't really within the Mad Decent realm. And that's kind of where we're at now. But yeah, I think overall, like hasn't really changed much, the label, the logo. So yeah, I would say recognizable in a lot of ways, especially synonymous with Diplo.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. We talked about this earlier because you had a comment on it where on the site it says, or I think your social channels, a music label or whatever. Like that's sort of a pretty interesting positioning statement for the brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to like, we want to be able to work in a lot of different areas, not necessarily what one would think is a mad decent release, but also just work with artists of all types. Like if we're interested in it, we want to be able to work it. And it's all about being really curious and open to that, I think. So yeah.
Eileen, is your label's brand recognizable? What does that mean?
I think it is. For those who don't know what Oh Boy is, John Prine, who is a singer-songwriter who recently passed away, he was on a major label for years and kind of decided that he was over having a middleman taking money because he was the one who was making it, and decided this was 41 years ago too. So this was sort of revolutionary at the time. He said, I'm going to start my own label. Like, I don't need this. My fans are going to buy my records and then the money will come to me. John, is a very simple guy. So our logo is the iconic face of Big Boy, even though, we can't probably legally say that. And it has become synonymous with independence. John was very much of, let's take out all the middlemen. Let's do this our own way. We call it the Oh Boy way, but let's just do things our own way. And they don't have to make sense to anybody else, because as long as it makes sense to our community and our fans, that's all we care about. So I think so. I mean, probably maybe not in other genres, but in our community, fans tattoo that on themselves. We sell Oh Boy merch because it's cool. I was saying once upon a time when I was young and I thought Sub Pop was like the coolest thing on earth, I had Sub Pop patches on my book bag and whatever. And I think Oh Boy has that same sort of effect with people in our community. They think it's cool. And I love that.
Does anybody have a label tattoo? Just out of curiosity. It'd be great if somebody had an Oh Boy tattoo right now.
It would be amazing.
Shams, how about you're coming out from a slightly different perspective because you're at a distribution company, but obviously Ingrooves has kind of a vibe of who they are as a brand, and you also deal with a lot of brands and the labels and artists you deal with. I mean, what's your perspective on what your company is about and how you look at it?
Yeah, I think as far as what our company is about, that's been evolving even in the short time I've been there. As far as expanding territories, I think there was a time where maybe music more on the Latin side was driving everything. Now we have really expanded extensively into K-pop, and then with myself and my team, on the R&B, hip hop, and reggae side, we have a much larger presence. But I think from my perspective, I guess part of my job is helping the many labels we work with identify what their brand is and find that voice. Because for us to be a good partner with these labels, dealing with so many labels, dealing with so many artists, it gets just increasingly more difficult to stand out. And if we're going to be here advocating for you, and if we're here trying to get you playlisting, and we're trying to partner you with the right brands, it's important for that message to be clear, and also to be unique, not in a forced way. I think sometimes that happens a lot where you have certain labels that feel like this is what's working right now, so let's just take that on, and it just comes off very artificial. But I think a lot of our labels have a very good understanding of that, and we're kind of here to guide them to kind of find that voice, I would say.
So maybe let's touch on a couple examples of things you've done, sort of label branding that you think has been successful. Whether it's partnerships or whatever, you obviously have a brand that people know, you have an audience, and what have you done? Give me a couple examples. Whoever wants to jump in first. I know everybody had a couple things when we were in the other room.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier. It's branding in artistry is really interesting because it's more important to find the right fits, right? We were saying that if you're an up and coming artist and the brand is throwing you a nice fancy check, you're going to want to say yes to it. But in order, and I'm sure that this is a lot of what you do, having that insight to say, does this brand really fit with me? Is this going to work with what I want to be in 10 years? That's really hard. This is sort of a random example, but White Castle Burgers, if anybody's from the Midwest, you know this, but recently sort of made John one of their ambassadors. And that's probably not the coolest partnership in the world, but John's from Chicago. Well, from outside Chicago. His fan base is the Midwest. That made sense. That makes sense a lot. Whereas we have other artists, I was saying that, the Appalachian music scene is really up and coming. And there are a lot of bigger brands that are sort of clamoring to say, oh, you're from this little place in Western Kentucky, so let's throw every single Yeti cooler and fishing gear and all this shit at you. Sorry. And but that doesn't necessarily fit. You know what I mean? Like, I think we kind of help try to navigate our artists to help them understand who they are in order to create the brand that they want to perceive for the next 50 years.
Do you think, because you've had a label established for a long time, I mean, a few of the labels have, but the label, like the White Castle thing, did that come to you because of Oh Boy, or was it the artist because of John? Or
I mean, John ate a lot of White Castles.
Oh, well.
He was, I think, Dairy Queen. We've had, Heinz ketchup because there was no secret that John liked hot dogs. Things that he would just naturally do, they came to us. John's a special example because he never sought sponsorship for anything. People just sort of came to him. We definitely engage with sponsors now, but I think that we try to do things that don't make us look kitschy and feel authentic.
Yeah. Who wants to jump in next with maybe an example of something on the brand side as a company that you've done that's been successful?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. With us, we have like an artist like Diplo who, I mean, really wants to do everything he can, be everywhere, can sit like fashion show, like a Givenchy, like Paris Fashion Week, Balenciaga, stuff like that, but also going to do like a deal with Crocs and make like a custom Crocs sandal. So, with that, there's like that wide range. But for like other artists we work with, like this artist, Bennett Coast, smaller up and coming indie rock artists, we have to be more precise about what he wants. And, luckily brands come to him. He's been able to model in like a guest campaign, small LA based brands, this one, Cherry Los Angeles, little things like that, where it's more so exposure and trying to tap into another community and be seen. And it'll hopefully, convert fans to, build that community and that fan base that's going to stick with you as the artist grows and develops. So it kind of varies from artist to artist.
Derek, Shams, anything you want to?
Yeah, I think one example that I mentioned earlier when we were talking was we have a label based out of Chicago, and I think the identity of that label is Chicago. Like that's the personality it's taken on. And one of their marquee artists did a partnership with the NFL where they essentially paired him with some players on the Bears as well as some other professional athletes and just kind of had this roundtable discussion about mental health. And I think that came out last year right before the draft. And I thought that was really interesting because I think that doesn't necessarily, naturally flow with everyone. But I think because at the time it seemed like the NFL was taking an active, interest in that topic. And it was something that was very core to his beliefs and core to the messaging he wanted to get out there. I thought that was a partnership where, sure, it's a check from the NFL and that's great, but it kind of gave him an opportunity to really amplify his voice when it came to, something that was important to the core messaging he was trying to put out there. So that was definitely one we were certainly proud to be part of.
Derek, anything you want to?
Yeah. I guess like I have a couple. I guess one that kind of immediately comes to mind in more recent times is this artist that we work with named unpronounceable name, 106 Point Never. He's been with the label for a long time, but he's recently, really sort of kind of soared off into like the world of scoring. He became friends with like the Safdie brothers, did the score for Uncut Gems and Good Time, and loosely through that was connected with The Weeknd and is the main producer on his last album, and also worked with The Weeknd on the Super Bowl halftime performance he did as like the music supervisor. And, I think along the way, he's never really lost sight of the music that he makes, which, comes from a place of, I would call like on the avant-garde sort of experimentalist side, and people are really drawn to that. And I think he's just been such like an incredible artist in the way that he releases his music and creates it, but also never willing to compromise his unique identity. It's gotten to a point where people really recognize that in a greater sphere. And to me, that's like the ultimate success, when you can achieve these like pretty globally like sought after positions or situations or opportunities, but you're able to do it on your own terms without compromising. And, your artistry really shines through first at the end of the day. And then I think, there's also like artists like, Aphex Twin. I thing at this point. Generally doesn't do very many like brand specific partnerships, but I think the ubiquity of his personality, his music, his art over the decades, and his style of imagery where his face is prominently featured on a lot of works in a very like twisted way, and a very strong logo has kind of led to a lot of people tattooing the logo on themselves, or a lot of contemporary artists who come from a newer generation like Frank Ocean and the like, always like constantly repping him and wearing his merch and things like that. So I think a lot of this, when it's not specific to the brand corporation partnership as much as it is to like the artistry, it's not easy to develop. It obviously takes a lot of work and a lot of consistency, but those are sort of the areas that I kind of see as maybe the most successful, where it feels like they get to be themselves while also being ubiquitous in a slightly more organic way.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So do you then, as a label or distributor, how do you talk to your artist roster and the folks that you deal with as far as them thinking about themselves as a brand? Is that something you even think about? Is that important? Whoever wants to jump in on that.
I mean, I think I was saying this earlier, one of the hurdles that we always end up with in the beginning, at least for our artists, is I find that artists, if they're early-ish in their career, don't want to put themselves as a brand, or it's hard for them to visualize themselves as a brand. I work primarily in the Americana genre, and that can be like a little thorn in people's side sometimes because they don't want to put a genre associated to their music. Totally understand that. However, getting them to think of themselves as a brand, and that, you probably shouldn't put drunken videos of yourself on Instagram because that's going to stay on your public persona, that takes a little while for us to jump over that hurdle and get them thinking about, like, to your point, what is in your past? Who are you as an artist? What kind of messages do you want to portray? And let's follow that path. Let's build that path. I think, and then you get to a certain level, and of course, and they are a brand. Then they know that they're a brand, and they own it, and they have a better sense of what's going to fit them the best. But I think at least in our world, there's a little bit of hand-holding in the beginning to make them realize that that's what they are.
Doran, maybe you could, Diplo is a brand. Diplo is somebody we've all heard of. He's been doing a lot of things. How does that relate to the label? Does Diplo's brand connect people to the label, vice versa?
Yeah, there's an obvious connection there too. The label, like as I was saying, is so hyper online and always has been. Everybody that works there has grown up with the internet and like really, really on it, like using platforms, social media, everything, finding music. So in a way, we're also really lucky that a lot of the artists we do work with are already aware of that fact of like what their brand is like online and like what they're putting out to people, or they have an idea of what they want to be just because they've grown up with that and they can see how everybody else is using the internet. Like, so in a way that's good. In a way it can also be bad. If you're too online, there's risks with everything, but it makes it easy in a way for a lot of the artists to know. They come in with an idea of what they want to be. They're like, oh, I love this. I love that. I've seen this here. I've seen that there. And it helps us to kind of build that out for them and sort of piece it all together, what they want to achieve in a way. But yeah.
Shamz, is that something that you're having any of these conversations with the labels that are under the umbrella?
Yeah, I would say so. I think because I primarily work with hip hop, a lot of these labels and just artists, they skew a little bit younger. And I think a lot of them kind of come in with their own brand to a degree. Sometimes they don't realize that they do, or maybe there might be a little bit of hand-holding to articulate that and really like just get that in front of them. But I think as a concept, just with the genre as a whole, I think a lot of them kind of already get that. So sometimes it's kind of helping to guide the vision, how to sometimes just explicitly put it on paper. Sometimes it's just having these brainstorm calls with them to just go through if at least with the labels I work with, a lot of what they're doing is aimed at getting playlist placement or at accentuating their brand and getting premium placements, with whatever brand. And if that's the goal, then it's like, you're having these conversations to really flesh it out so that when I'm having conversations, whether it be with DSPs or with brands, I could kind of speak on their behalf and explain to them like why this label is different from this label, why this label is perfect for this particular opportunity that you have. So sometimes without explicitly having that conversation, you're having that conversation.
No,
Derek, you're nodding.
Yeah. No, I think that's dead on, Shams. Like, I think in general, like a lot of where that comes from, I think the more established artists, I think have been around the block a few times and have a better idea of what that is. But I think for a lot of younger artists, maybe, I guess the right word is like sometimes you have to kind of challenge them, like the ideas shouldn't necessarily be coming from the label. I think in a lot of cases, it should be coming from the artist. And I feel like the most like productive conversations are where you just keep it going, It's like you ask them to elaborate a little bit further and get them to a point where they're able to define some of these ideas in their own heads and just making sure that it's coming from them. And that's, I think, generally when you just have like such a natural area for everyone's work off of, like on the general like recording label side, when the artist feels really strong and confident about an idea that originated from them that, like you're saying, you're kind of coaching them into. And yeah, I mean, I feel like generally that has the best effect where everyone feels generally the most excited and motivated to work towards a goal over, kind of like brute forcing or trying to impose an idea maybe too hard on a specific artist. But.
So one of the things we also talked about earlier that I think is really important to share with the room is, as you identify what you are as a brand, I think over the last decade, it's become more critical to think about causes and issues and things that, we all want to impact the world positively. And, from climate change to social issues, like how does that come into play as a label and with your artists when you think about branding? Do you have a connection to certain things and how did that come about? Eileen, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, Oh Boy John started sort of writing protest songs in the 70s. There was, and as we've sort of grown as a label, we've become more socially conscious and have become very well known in our community for being a socially conscious label. We were speaking earlier and you said that it's sort of hard because as a label, we have our very specific views on things and charities and things that we get very heavily involved in, but that we don't necessarily want to put down our artist throats too. It's perfectly fine if one of our artists doesn't want to get involved in a charity or something that we're involved in. That being said, though, I do think certain artists sign to certain labels because of certain things, right? I think artists sign to Oh Boy because of the fact that they know we're so outspoken about our campaigns and things that we do. We were talking earlier about one of the greatest campaigns that I think Oh Boy gets very involved in is when we see something that really hits our own turf. So recently, a bunch of tornadoes just kind of decimated parts of Kentucky. John's family's from Kentucky. There's a very big, strong tie there. And where we probably couldn't cut Kentucky $1 million check, we made a t-shirt that was like, Kentucky's pretty good. John has a song called, Pretty Good. Put this cool John Prine shirt and let the fans buy it and then send all the money to them. And then we matched that. So there's ways that we feel like because of the fact for the past 40 plus years, we've had such a strong community that we get all of them involved in helping certain causes that feel, again, authentic to who we are. Yeah. I think as long as you stay on that path, then people are more willing to get involved. The family recently started the Hello in There Foundation, which is just another platform for us to give money to causes that we believe in. And that's been something that's been, very, very humbling experience because people are giving money without us asking. They just want to be able to do something good. They know that we're not gonna go on fancy vacations with that money. We're gonna use it and really do something powerful. And it allows for people to get involved and do something and not just our artists being, the people doing things.
Anyone want to jump in next? Cause, is that something that's important to the brand? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in a lot of things. And like, every artist has different initiatives they want to take up. For example, like Aluna, one of our priority artists, a central thing for her and her whole rollout for the last like 2.5 years is like centering dance music in its blackness and like the origins of that and the roots, and also like educating her fan base, new fans, anyone that's a fan of like dance music in general, where it's all come from. And like, she's like also learning at the same time as she goes, but it's important for her to be able to be with her platform to help put that on. So like in the ways that we can help elevate that, like it all comes back to like being able to leverage our branding to elevate like our artists and like have them make the most impact that they can. So that's kind of like a big issue for her. And anything, we want to follow our artists like wherever it takes them, as long as like, yeah, it does coincide with like us and we agree. But yeah.
Shamz, anything that you've been involved with or with any of the labels, or is that cause-based thing something important for the brand identity?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd say, Ingrooves, I think, does, as just a distributor, a pretty good job of being involved with social causes. I think we have a very diverse and active staff. And I think it's been just a strong platform where people are able to kind of speak about causes they believe in. We're able to kind of get the messaging out there. We could donate where necessary. I think our team as a whole does a really good job of getting involved. But as it pertains to our labels, I think there's a lot of that as well, where they'll voice certain causes that they're passionate about and see how we could help them, or see how we could get Universal Music Group involved to kind of, maybe do some sort of match program and things like that. So yeah, I do think over time, to be quite honest, I think this country as a whole, there was a big awakening post George Floyd, where I think, you could question the sincerity if you want, but I think a lot of companies in general just got a lot more involved after that point, which has been great. The hope is to kind of continue to be a voice to keep these movements going and not wait for some tragedy to happen before acting. So I think we've been pretty good at being forward thinking with that. Yeah.
Derek, anything with Warp and with what you guys have been doing?
Yeah, I think, I guess on like an artist level, similar to what Doran was saying, we really try to support the causes and the identifying aspects of their record campaigns when they're geared towards a specific cause, an identity, or a market, and really try to make sure that we're trying our best on that side. And also just on a team level, and also on an artist level, generally, the company's always been like really supportive of individual causes that employees are really passionate about, or the artists are really passionate about, to varying degrees of publicity. I think in some cases, some artists want to make it a very like vocal part of their record campaign, or want it to be a very vocal component in what they're sharing on socials, and we'll try to support them as much as we can. And then I think in some cases as well, there are artists and staff members who want to contribute and want to provide resource to certain organizations or certain causes that they really care about, but they feel a little bit more inclined to keep it private to avoid seeming performative or having that sort of effect on it. So I think it just really depends. And I think a lot of this also stems from like a company level initiative, but it also like really comes down to the individuals and the causes that they want to support and how they really want us to be involved. And I think the label really tries to see itself as a resource to both staff and artists, however it can be, really.
So we're really flying through here, and I think we only have a few minutes left. So if anybody has any questions for the esteemed panel here, please raise your hand. I wish we had White Castle burgers. Like, we should have done a brand extension into the panel, right?
I know.
I was just wondering, how do you guys look at using the properties, like label properties and platforms you have to help newer developing artists, like whether it's label events or curated playlists, or, do your kind of label social media or label email list? Like, what have you found has worked, particularly around new acts?
Let's answer that.
I would say like we definitely use them to an extent. In the initial phases, it's good just for like developing artists, get the name out there. But at some point we do try to make it a focus fully on the artist and building like their own profiles. And because at the end of the day, it's really about building that community, leveraging, like, I think everybody's kind of touched on that, like leveraging the label's resources and what we've built over time. And then implanting that in our artists so that they can be sustainable moving forward, because at the end of the day, we're servicing our artists and our clients just like any other business. We want to see them succeed and continue to grow in that aspect. But yeah.
Any questions? Other questions? We got a question way over. No? Are you yawning or? Here's a question.
You
Okay.
did a good job.
You want to shout it out? All right.
It's a small room. I mean, you could just say it. I could hear you.
This is for the audience at home.
Yeah.
We need the mic.
My name's Jesse with Gravitas Recordings. We're probably best known for breaking an artist named Closey. And I guess our brand is very tied to that artist. And so now she's kind of outgrown us, launched her own label, and has new management and booking. And so I guess just question, have you guys experienced that? And if so, how do you sort of pivot, rebrand, and not totally kind of like lose that connection, but sort of reestablish your identity? And I guess the obvious answer is find a new big artist.
I'd love to take that answer.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's very pertinent to, oh boy, John Prine started that record label for himself just to put out his music. John passed away 2 years ago from COVID, and there were a lot of people who are going, okay, so now does Oh Boy just shut its doors? Like your captain just left the ship. And what we found was that you've still done the work to build this community, and this community is still looking to us to say, we're going to trust you. We're going to stand behind you guys. We're going to help you. And I think for us personally, it was really surprising to say people still really cared about making sure that we're keeping our lights on, that the artists that we signed are, it feels a little strange to say this, but are continuing John's legacy, continuing what we have spent the past 41 years building. Our artists right now are, most of our artists right now are on a European tour. That is just the Oh Boy Records tour. And we used our email database to sell tickets, the Oh Boy email database to sell tickets. And it was kind of a crapshoot because I thought, wow, these are John's fans, really. But we knew that it was really important to make sure that we were continuing to feed that community and not saying, hey, just because this artist is gone doesn't mean that you're not still part of our family. Oh Boy is run by the Prime family. So our fans and our community feel like they're in our family. And in order to keep that alive, we knew that we had to be very communicative with them and making sure that we relayed the message that we really still needed them. And it works. And I feel like for your label, as long as these artists or these fans have stayed with you already, they're still there as long as you've given them something to trust, that you're going to continue to put out good music, that, at this point we sell, this sounds so silly, but like we sell a lot of fly swatters, a lot of fly swatters. John has a song called Angel from Montgomery, and there's a line about talking about flies in the kitchen. I mean, I'm talking thousands of fly swatters, y'all. And this isn't like some fancy wooden plastic. This is plastic. But it always amazes me that whatever we put out, our fans are going to buy because they trust us. And I think that's, at the end of the day, when you're building a brand for an artist or a label or whatever, you just have to build trust with your fans. And as long as you do that, they're going to sustain you for 42 years.
So I guess a follow-up would just be like there's an artist label that's created by that artist, and then there's a label that then discovers an artist, and that artist becomes the champion. I've seen the two, like we're the latter, but I sort of see like Diplo of Mad Decent sort of like that's the really driving force behind it. And obviously you guys have had lots of successes. Is there anything that comes up where you see like those two different paths? I mean, eventually you want the label to stand on its own without having to be so one singular artist driving it.
Let me ask you a quick question though. Have you developed who you think you are, your company as a brand? You feel like you have that answer?
I think we had that before our big artist closing, and that led to the discovery and launch of her.
You were going to jump in and answer that or say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to always like keep your eyes on like what else you want to build up with that, and like it's like a real privilege to be able to have like Diplo on the label and be able to, you know, give us these opportunities to be able to put on other artists. So it's kind of a give and take with that. Like, you know, we just released an album with Diplo, and, you know, he'll go off and do other stuff. He'll do an album with like Columbia and do the country album. And, you know, now we have that sort of runway. We've gotten like all the success from the Diplo album, and now we can go work on other projects and sort of spread the goodwill there. So it's like a bit of give and take on both sides.
Makes sense.
And how you balance that.
We're going to do a quick speed round. I know we're almost out of time, but I want to allow each of the panelists, if there's an artist or something right now that is just like captivating you, that you love, that you want to make sure we all know about and check out. What's like your current passion, artist, music, something?
We have two artists about to put out records the next couple months. Kelsey Walden, who is from Western Kentucky, from Monkey's Eyebrow, Kentucky specifically. A holler, look that up. And another artist from Cincinnati named Arlo McKinley, who is another phenomenal artist. They both have albums coming out in the next couple of months, so please pay attention to them. Those are probably our biggest passions right now. And Trey Burt, who will be playing at the Libera Awards tonight, so go and watch him.
Derek, you have something?
Yeah, so I guess we're currently mid-campaign for this new signing on Warp. His name's Wulu. He's based in South London. Incredible kind of music production legacy, and also like an incredible amount of influence in his music. And yeah, I mean, he's definitely still sort of growing his legs out in the States, you know, primarily being most known in the UK, but wow, like what an incredible album. It's coming out pretty soon. Extremely cross-genre, post-genre. Sits between so many different spaces that I don't even really want to describe.
What's the spelling?
It's WU-LU. And also just like a really incredible person, such a sweet guy.
Cool. Doran?
Yeah, kind of on the distribution side, we're working with this artist, Earth Eater, based in New York, also helping build out her label, Chemical X. And it's really cool to see an artist who's like with such like a clear, like distinct vision for how she wants everything to run, from like music to art, the concepts around everything. She's got a really strong team around her too, in terms of building like her own community of artists she works with, artists she brings into her fold. But yeah, like it's like a pleasure to like work with someone who has like such a distinct vision like that. It's really easy to bounce ideas from their original starting point and like running with that. So
The
yeah.
spelling of the artist?
Earth Eater, just one word.
Easy. Like it sounds.
EARTHE. Yeah.
Shams, you got something good?
I mean, we work with so many labels, it's hard to just name. I mean, I could just rattle off a few really quick. Yeah, let me get my promo. So G Herbo, rapper out of Chicago. I've always loved his music. That was a really exciting signing of ours. So looking forward to new music from him. It's a young kid out of Chicago named Shoebox Baby, who kind of is just getting started. But definitely, if you're into drill rap, that's somebody like on the weekends, that's who I'm personally listening to. Ant Beal, rapper out of out of New Jersey. I think what's really dope about him is his music's really creative, and he also loves fishing. I really do not know any rappers who are in that realm that cross those verticals. I believe he actually has a sponsorship with Bass Pro Fish. I don't even know what it's called. Bass Pro Fish Shop or somebody? Bass Pro. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Excuse my ignorance.
Perfect.
Yeah, that. So they have a sponsorship with him where he's essentially going fishing and just talking about rap and interviewing other fishermen. And he enters fishing tournaments and like performs well. It's so bugged
Wow.
out. But really love that kid's music. And Made in Tokyo. That'd be another one I'd throw out there. I know he has new music coming soon. Love his artistic vision. But yeah, a lot of artists, a lot of labels that I'm excited about that, you know, I listen to in my spare time, and I'm also excited to help them, you know, get their music out.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us. I want to thank the panelists. You know, they're all cool, approachable. Come up, ask them questions. Once again, I'm from the Clio Awards. My last comment, I want to encourage you, if you haven't, go to the Clio's website and look at winners. You can look at winners in brand partnerships and in design from other industries outside of music. We have Clio Sports, Clio Entertainment. And I think it's a great way just to get inspiration for ideas of things you can do with your artists and your labels. So thank you, everybody, for joining us
Thanks, guys.
today. Now let's